Drive across any bridge on Florida's Gulf Coast and look down. On a normal afternoon, what you will see in Marina. After Marina is not what those marinas are supposed to look like. Vessels sitting at odd angles against the seawall, a sailboat half submerged with nobody on it. A center console with its bow buried in marsh grass 50 feet from its slip. Boats that are clearly not going anywhere, ever again. Florida's Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission confirmed over 1,000 abandoned and derelict vessels in state waters at the start of 2025. In 2024 alone, the state spent nearly $13 million just pulling them out, up from less than $2 million in 2020. The number is not stabilizing. It is climbing every single year. And this is not just a hurricane story. Storms made it dramatically worse, but the boats were already piling up long before any of the 2024 storms appeared on radar. What is driving this involves three forces that converged at exactly the wrong time. And unless you understand all three, you will not understand what you are actually looking at when you drive past one of these marinas and wonder how it got this way. Between 2020 and 2021, the National Marine Manufacturers Association confirmed that over 800,000 first-time boat buyers entered the U.S. market. Many had never owned a boat, had no realistic sense of annual operating costs, and financed their purchase during a low-rate window that made monthly payments feel manageable. That window closed. By 2024, the average 60-month marine loan had climbed to 8.4%, according to LendingTree. On a boat financed at 3.5% in 2021, the owner is now either underwater on a loan they cannot refinance or facing an exit that costs real money they did not budget for. The most common reason a boat becomes derelict, according to Sarasota Police marine officers who work these cases daily, is money. Not a hurricane. Not indifference. Money. An owner who cannot afford the repair, cannot sell fast enough to cover accumulating slip fees, and cannot walk away without incurring fees. They also cannot afford, often makes a decision most people cannot imagine. They simply stop showing up. The boat stays, the slip fees stack, and the marina chains it to the dock when payments go delinquent. Some owners disappear entirely, leaving behind a vessel worth far less than the combined debt of the loan, the unpaid slip, and whatever repair it needed before they stopped caring. And because the boat has no other obvious use and no one willing to take it for free, it sits. In the West Coast Inland Navigation District, covering Lee, Sarasota, Charlotte, and Manatee counties, the total cost to remove derelict vessels from 2018 to 2024 was $1.3 million. Out of 187 removal cases, the registered owner removed the vessel themselves in exactly 2 cases, 2 out of 187. That ratio is not a rounding error. It is the documented reality of what happens when a boat becomes a financial liability that exceeds the owner's willingness to engage with it. If the pandemic debt created the kindling, hurricanes Helene and Milton in 2024 were the match. The back-to-back storms hit the same Gulf Coast communities within 2 weeks of each other in October 2024, displacing hundreds of vessels across Tampa Bay alone. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission deployed 17 additional officers and 3 dedicated derelict vessel specialists to Southwest Florida immediately after Milton's landfall. Statewide, more than 700 derelict vessels were recorded in the direct aftermath. More than 426 were submitted to the Florida Division of Emergency Management for contractor removal, with additional cases added daily. Here is where the hurricane story gets complicated. Many of those boats were not abandoned because a storm destroyed them. They were abandoned because a storm gave owners already struggling financially the cover they needed to walk away from a problem they could not solve. A boat with a pre-existing maintenance deficit, a loan balance higher than its market value, and an owner who had not used it in months does not become a salvage priority when it washes against a seawall. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, FWC, officers noted that identifying ownership on displaced vessels is one of the hardest parts of the job. Many boats changed hands multiple times, some were acquired cheaply online, and in some cases, no one can determine whose boat it actually is. The removal cost is not trivial. A single derelict vessel removal in Florida averages $14,000 to $23,000, according to FWC program figures. One specific case in Bradenton involved a 31-foot boat that had to be removed from beneath a pier. That operation cost $21,000. State estimates put the total cost to clear all current derelict vessels in Florida waters at between $10 million and $20 million. That bill is paid by taxpayers, not by the owners who walked away. This is the force that predates the pandemic and outlasts every hurricane, and it is the one the marine industry most wants to avoid discussing. Boats do not depreciate to zero and then disappear. They depreciate to a value below the cost of removing them, and at that point the economic incentive to deal with them responsibly vanishes entirely. Fiberglass boats are expensive to dispose of. Unlike steel or aluminum vessels that can be sold for scrap, fiberglass has almost no recyclable market value. Grinding down and properly disposing of a fiberglass hull costs thousands of dollars, borne entirely by the owner. When a boat reaches the end of its viable life and disposal costs more than the asset is worth, which happens routinely with older production boats, the path of least resistance is not paying the marina, not responding to notices, and moving on. An FWC officer said in a 2025 press report that when people bought these vessels, new or used, they had no idea how much money and time it takes to maintain them. The NOAA Marine Debris Program has been running multi-state Gulf Coast removal operations, with confirmed activity in Texas, Mississippi, and Alabama. In Mississippi, 18 vessels were removed since the summer of 2024, totaling more than 411,000 pounds of debris. In Alabama, 10 vessels from Baldwin County during March and April of 2025 added 150,000 pounds more. In Texas, boats sunk deep in Gulf bottom mud off Galveston were pulled from waterways adjacent to homes, restaurants, and a major bridge. This is a regional emergency conducted at industrial scale. It is not a maintenance issue that resolves itself. Florida spent almost $13 million removing derelict vessels in 2024. That was up from $7 million in 2023, $6 million in 2022, $5 million in 2021, and less than $2 million in 2020. Every single year, the cost has gone up. Every year, the number of vessels under investigation has grown. In 2025, the state spent more than $9 million in the first 11 months alone. Officials stated publicly in December of 2025 that the problem was outpacing their removal capacity. That means vessels are entering the derelict pipeline faster than they can be pulled from the water. The environmental cost runs separately. NOAA's Office of Response and Restoration documents that derelict vessels leach petroleum products, heavy metals from bottom paint, and other pollutants into surrounding water continuously as they deteriorate. Seagrass beds, oyster reefs, coral structures, and mangrove habitats are documented as most sensitive to this type of chronic chemical exposure. A boat that sinks in a shallow bay is not just an eyesore, it damages habitat, disrupts navigation, and continues releasing contamination for years before anyone deals with it. Multiply that by 1,000 active cases, and you begin to understand why NOAA is running this as a multi-year, multi-state emergency program with federal funding. The legal exposure for owners who abandon vessels is theoretically severe. Under Florida law, intentionally abandoning a vessel in state waters can result in a third-degree felony, up to 5 years in prison, and a $5,000 fine plus all removal costs. Florida's 2025 legislation, effective July 1st of that year, expanded enforcement authority, and created escalating penalties for repeat violations. In practice, the legal deterrent works only when you can find the owner, which, in a market flooded with boats that changed hands multiple times during the pandemic surge, is often the hardest part of the entire process. If you want to avoid costly mistakes most boaters make, be sure to check the description for our cheap guide that will save you thousands, and subscribe. The trajectory from here is not difficult to project. The boats purchased in 2020 and 2021 with borrowed money at rates that no longer exist, maintained by owners who underestimated every cost attached to them, left in saltwater environments that work on them continuously, and those boats are aging into the problem window at the same time. Some will be sold at a loss before they deteriorate completely. Some will be maintained by owners who understood what they were buying. A significant number will follow the path the FWC has already documented. The owner stops responding, the boat stays, the state pays for removal, and the taxpayer absorbs the cleanup bill for a private purchase decision made years earlier. For anyone who uses Gulf Coast waterways, whether you own a boat or not, this is immediate and practical. A derelict vessel invisible in low light is a navigational hazard that destroys propellers and puts people in the water in seconds. A submerged hull in a channel you have run 100 times does not appear on your chart plotter. Tampa Bay, Charlotte Harbor, Sarasota Bay, Pensacola Bay, the Galveston area, and the Mississippi Sound all have documented active derelict vessel cases right now according to NOAA and state agency tracking data. If you own a boat and the annual operating costs no longer pencil out against your actual use, there are legitimate options before abandonment. Florida's Vessel Turn-In program allows owners who have received a written citation or warning to surrender their vessel for destruction at no cost. That program exists because the state already knows what happens when owners do not use it. The boats being abandoned on the Gulf Coast right now are not an accident. They are the predictable endpoint of purchase decisions that never accounted for what saltwater, time, and carrying costs actually do to a vessel no one is maintaining. That math is coming due across the entire Gulf Coast right now, and the bill is still climbing.